Asia, I'm excited to have you here in the TAPS 10 studio to have a conversation about something that we both have a lot of passion about. Um, we'll jump right into it, but if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I am the Behavior Health Navigator here at the Northwest Educational Service District. I work in the School Safety and Wellness Center. In my role, I support schools with suicide prevention, intervention, postvention, and I also support our level 2 threat assessment team. And just happy to be here today.
Great. We're at a point where our class has been discussing reactive aggression and targeted violence and the pathway to violence. And, some people make the assumption that students with disabilities or mental health diagnosis engage in targeted violence more often. What does the research really tell us about this?
Yeah, so great question. So what the data shows us is that students with disabilities do not engage in targeted violence at higher rates compared to their peers. However, there are some characteristics associated with certain disabilities, for example, ADHD and autism, that can lead to more frequent verbal or physical aggression at school, and therefore more likely to come to the attention of others, and so sometimes more likely to be involved in the threat assessment process for that reason.
So, when a student with a disability shows aggression or they make a threatening statement or comment, what might be happening, beneath the surface?
Yeah, so often what we're seeing is reactive aggression, which is a response to frustration, sometimes sensory overload, or just emotional dysregulation in general. This is especially common for students with impulsivity, low frustration tolerance, difficulty regulating emotions, or challenges with social skills, social understanding, and just coping skills in general. And all these are features that we often see in students with ADHD or autism.
It makes a lot of sense, but how should a threat assessment team decipher if the behavior is coming from emotional dysregulation or if it's a possible indicator of future harm?
Well, the team's role is really to dig deeper and analyze the behavior carefully and objectively based on facts. And they really need to ask, could this disability be contributing to these observable behaviors? Or another way to think about it is there evidence of planning or escalating intent that could indicate a true safety concern? So really what we're trying to do is distinguish between reactive dysregulation and targeted violence.
Some students, especially those, with autism, might say or do things that seem threatening without really meaning or intending harm.
Yes, some neurodivergent students experience differences in perspective taking and social communication and may show rigid, rule-based thinking. Mimicking words and behaviors is often a way they learn or regulate, frequently modeled from peers or media. Students may not realize how these actions are perceived and are not necessarily intending harm. This is why teams should slow down, ask curious questions, and seek deeper understanding before assuming a behavior is threatening.
In a lot of the level twos that we've done, we have seen or read about these behaviors. But can you give us some that might look or sound threatening, but were actually signs of emotional dysregulation?
Yes, for sure. So, a lot of times we see verbal outbursts such as, yelling. We can see threat-like statements that are really made in anger, such as "I hate you" or um, "I want you to die." Those kinds of things that are really impulsivity in the moment of frustration. Sometimes swearing that can be really intimidating. Um, when a situation may feel out of control for a student, physical irritation, pushing through to get somewhere, hitting objects, slamming doors. throwing items. Sometimes intense eye contact can be really intimidating to some people. Withdrawal, shutdown, or not behaving and responding in a way to authority that you would expect someone to respond. For example, you call their name from across a cafeteria and they turn away and start walking the other direction. So it could be concerning, but could be explained in the context of their disability. I also see students with a strong fixation or repetitive talk about weapons or violence or dark themes, sometimes related to special interests, but are not actually a threat. And these behaviors can sometimes stem from executive function challenges or lagging executive function skills, sensory overload, like we mentioned before, or just difficulty communicating emotions. And some of these behaviors are just simply misunderstood. For example, differences with eye contact, response time, ways, like I said, of interacting with authority figures, and especially when it comes to special interests, because sometimes those may seem concerning, like a special interest that someone may have with war or weapons. But if you dig a little deeper, it may just be that they're fascinated with one particular aspect.
Those are all real life things that we have either seen or read when we're doing these assessments. But I keep going back to that question. Then how does a school truly determine whether, these kind of behaviors or situations actually pose a threat or not?
Yep. So we really have to look beyond the words or actions that the student has said or engaged in and really look for understanding of intent, planning, and capacity for violence. Um, so, what schools should be doing is gathering as much information as possible, trying to understand the context for where this threat occurred, before, during, and after. People involved, looking at what the student's baseline behavior is, interviewing the student and actually learning how they're feeling and what their intent was, assessing patterns, not isolated incidents, is important. Looking for planning behaviors is really key. So, have they been researching weapons? Have they been identifying targets, making concrete plans? That would really indicate a higher level of concern. It's important to consult with uh, staff in your building that know the student or that are aware of the student's needs. If they're new to you, then connecting with a previous school or and home to find out more about the student's behavior. And so the overarching goal is really to distinguish emotional dysregulation from targeted violence and responding with supports and intervention when the behavior reflects distress rather than a threat. That's the key.
I mean, you wrap that part up nicely. Well spoken. What is the benefit of a student threat assessment team during the process when we have situations like any of the above that you've given?
Yeah, so it really helps the team, the school, avoid impulsive or, responses that are either under responsive or overly responsive. It helps the team just slow down, gather information, really get a full picture of what the level of concern is. And when we're thinking about gathering a multidisciplinary team, it is important to remember that it is unrealistic to expect school teams to have expertise in every type of disability. And so, if a student does have a disability that the team is less familiar with, it's best practice to seek guidance or support from specialists and organizations like the one that we work for, the Northwest Educational Service District. We can help with that with training, consultation, and guidance really at any step of the way in this process.
Also, you all need to know that Asia offers many classes, and this was just a overview of some of the in-depth classes that she offers. So please reach out if you have questions. Asia, thanks for coming on. Anything else before we go?
No, thanks so much for doing this.